The man in question was identified as Elijah Perry, a local railroad worker in Jeffersonville, Indiana. Branham's followers said Perry had died in his home and been revived through prayer. However, this story was quickly investigated and overturned. According to the Jeffersonville Evening News, no physician had ever declared Perry dead. His sister confirmed he had been gravely ill in 1939, but had gradually recovered. When questioned by reporters, Perry refused to give a public statement, and no medical documentation was ever produced. Since he was never in the morgue, his testimony would have been devastating for Branham. A telegram from the Winnipeg Tribune asked for basic facts: cause of death, name of the morgue, time of the event. But the newspaper could only respond, "We could not substantiate this reported phenomenon." As his fame spread, Branham's teachings began to shift. He preached less about Christ and more about himself, his angelic commission, his visions, his role in God's final plan. He spoke in cryptic language about dispensations, mysteries, and the serpent's seed, the racist doctrine that fueled hate groups of the era. While early Pentecostal preachers called sinners to repentance, Branham called audiences to recognize his authority. He was no longer just a preacher, he had become the message. This blend of hype, mysticism, and unchallenged authority would become the model for an entire generation of charismatic leaders, and it was only just beginning. In 1948, just as William Branham's national fame was surging, a new spiritual movement erupted from a Bible school in North Battleford, Saskatchewan. Known as the Latter Rain Movement, it began as a spontaneous outbreak of prophecy, laying on of hands, and charismatic fervor. But behind the scenes, its theology and methods were being shaped by a single dominant influence: William Branham. Although Branham never formally aligned himself with the Latter Rain organization, his imprint was everywhere. The movement adopted his practice of impartation through physical touch, his belief in ongoing prophetic revelation, and his vision of an end-time remnant who would demonstrate supernatural power before Christ's return. His concept of angelic visitations and personalized words of knowledge became standard fare in Latter Rain meetings. Even the idea of restoring apostles and prophets, a concept explicitly rejected by most traditional Pentecostal denominations, was lifted straight from Branham's stage theology. What began as parallel streams quickly merged. The Voice of Healing, a magazine and ministry network founded by Gordon Lindsay in 1948, was originally created for one purpose: to promote William Branham's ministry. In its very first issue, Lindsay stated that the publication existed to report on Branham's revivals and spread news of the supernatural outpouring associated with him. But as the healing revival gained momentum, the publication expanded to include other charismatic evangelists: Jack Coe, A.A. Allen, Oral Roberts, and many others, many of whom embraced variations of Branham's eschatology, impartation theology, and prophetic spectacle. For several years, the Voice of Healing served as the central platform uniting the healing revivalists with Latter Rain leaders, forming a single prophetic current that spread across North America and into the developing world. Though the magazine eventually evolved beyond Branham, it never left his shadow. In the years that followed, the Voice of Healing would become the foundation for Christ for the Nations, one of the most influential institutions in modern charismatic education, ensuring that Branham's theological DNA would live on in the next generation of revivalists, missionaries, and supernatural ministries. Key figures in Latter Rain, including George Houghton, George Warnock, and Ern Baxter, who served as Branham's campaign manager, adapted Branham's scattered revelations into a systematic theology. Warnock's 1951 book, The Feast of Tabernacles, turned Branham's vague ideas about end-time glory into a full doctrine, that a perfected group of manifest sons of God would rise to global dominion before Christ's return as the so-called Joel's Army. Traditional Pentecostal denominations like the Assemblies of God quickly denounced Latter Rain teachings as heretical. In 1949, they issued official statements rejecting the movement's emphasis on prophecy, impartations, and extra-biblical revelations. But by then, it was too late. Branham's theology had already been institutionalized, not through denominations, but through independent networks of apostles, prophets, and healing evangelists who believed they were birthing a new era. Branham never wore the latter rain label, but his ideas powered the machine. He modeled the prophetic persona. Latter rain gave it structure, language, and theological confidence. Together, they created a movement that would re-emerge decades later under a different name, the New Apostolic Reformation, but with the same DNA. As the healing revivals cooled in the late 1950s, a new concern gripped the charismatic world: how to maintain the supernatural momentum without losing doctrinal control. For many, the answer came not through revival tents, but through structures of authority and submission, discipleship, accountability, and spiritual covering. This next phase of charismatic development would carry Branham's influence into new organizational forms, TAS, particularly through the rise of apostolic networks. One of the key figures bridging these worlds was Ern Baxter, Branham's longtime campaign manager and public defender. For years, Baxter traveled alongside Branham, translating his mystical sermons into palatable theological language and helping manage his increasingly erratic schedule. Their partnership allowed Branham to gain credibility among a wider swath of revival leaders. Baxter would later go on to help pioneer the shepherding movement, bringing with him Branham's emphasis on prophetic authority, hierarchical order, and the perfecting of the saints. Meanwhile, one of Branham's most devoted admirers, T.L. Osborne, helped extend Branham's supernaturalism to the global stage. Known for his international crusades and polished delivery, Osborne became a key bridge between Branham's mystical ministry and the emerging prosperity gospel. But Osborne's devotion went far beyond admiration. He had fully embraced Branham's deity doctrine, the belief that Branham was not merely a prophet, but God veiled in human flesh as the most powerful manifestation of the Son of God. Shortly before his death, Branham declared that his manifestation as the Old Testament prophet Elijah was Jesus Christ for our day. At Branham's memorial service in 1966, held during a full Gospel Business Men's Fellowship International Convention, Osborne publicly declared this belief to a room filled with charismatic leaders. He did not speak in metaphor.